Welkom bij de podcast Energie en Business en leuk dat je weer luistert, want in deze podcast gaat het alleen maar over de mens. En waarom doe je wat je doet? Ik ben daar super nieuwsgierig naar. We hebben gesprekken over bewustzijn, over eventueel een bedrijf van iemand, persoonlijke verhalen, spiritualiteit, energie natuurlijk. En mijn doel is met deze podcast om diepgaande en boeiende gesprekken te voeren, zodat we eigenlijk zien dat we niet zoveel verschillen van elkaar, dat we allemaal op dezelfde manier gemaakt zijn. Het is absoluut niet mijn intentie om het een reclamepraatje te laten worden voor degene die ik interview. Want ik geloof namelijk dat we pas echt interessante dialogen gaan krijgen wanneer we de diepte ingaan en ons richten op het leven zelf. Heel veel plezier. Hallo en leuk dat je weer luistert. En vandaag ga ik weer met een Engelse gast in gesprek. En ik zal haar zo even in het Engels ook voorstellen, dat is leuke voor haar. Welcome, Jacqueline.
Thank you.
Yeah, we met in Prague and we sat together on a table and we said, well, let's have a podcast together. Let's have a chat together because you are doing amazing things. You worked for 10 years, you worked in prisons in the UK,
Yeah.
and now you made a shift. You want to do this for other people, for coaches, for transformative coaches, I think. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
So I came from a background of project management. I like to say I'm a recovering project manager and customer services and IT. And that was my whole life. That was my education, that was my work, that was everything. But I was like a square peg in a round hole. And I found the principles, and shortly after that, I started a social enterprise called Beyond Recovery. And I worked with, first of all, in the community with addictions, and then for 10 years in prison. Yeah, up until the end of last year when I closed the business and pivoted. And when I closed the business, I was very sad. You know, it was quite a hard thing to do because I had it connected with my identity, and I thought, who am I if I'm not the prison lady, you know? And all that I'd already gotten over not going into the prison because it was difficult since COVID. But I really thought, that I wasn't anything without it
Mhm.
almost. And so there was a lot of sadness, there was a lot of angst, and I couldn't think what else to do, what else to do. And then once I let it go, all fresh thought came and fresh ideas. And one of them was everywhere I go around the world, doesn't matter where I am, people ask me, how do you work with prison? How do you work with homeless people? How do you work with refugees?
Mhm.
They ask me, how do you get into these underserved communities? And I thought, well, I can teach people to do that. So that's what I'm doing now. I set up a business to do that.
And how do you work? Can you just picture a day when you went into prison? How does it work? Because I also have a friend, she works in prison, and she doesn't talk about it like you do. So I would
Oh,
love to know because she really sometimes says, well, there are really people they can't be saved. They are so fucked up in their head. They don't know and they have no conscience.
ah,
How's your take on that? Because I'm curious about that.
that's amazing. I love that question. So I don't see that to be true at
Mhm.
all. I've worked with people who've been in prison a very, very long time, people who have done very bad things.
Mhm.
What we call high risk prisoners, people who will never be let out of prison. And I've worked with people who've done petty crime as well. So I've worked with the whole range of people, and nobody is born bad. Nobody is born and grows up and is a child and thinks, I know what I want to be when I grow up, a criminal or a rapist or a paedophile. No, nobody thinks that when they're 1 or 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so circumstances and the way we see the world affects how we behave. And so people end up doing bad things and they end up believing that that's all that they can do. So I worked with a young man, and he would be in prison for the rest of his life. He was part of a paedophile ring. And I know this is triggering for some people, so apologies for that. I'm not saying at all that what he did was I am saying what he did was bad, really bad, terrible, terrible for the parents, terrible for the people involved. But he tested my belief in good people, because when I didn't know what he'd done, and he'd been such a sweetheart in the group and getting coffee for everyone and funny, he was such a sweetheart. And then I found out what he did. And I actually had a whole weekend of being completely depressed because I thought it can't be true. If it's not true for him, it's not true for anyone. If he is the exception, then there is no rule. And the rule was that we're all born pure essence. And if he isn't pure essence, then it's not true that everyone was born like that. So these were the questions. And am I doing any good here? Am I actually, what am I doing here? Am I fooling myself? I came to the end of that weekend. I spent the whole weekend on the sofa, and I came to the end of that weekend, and I knew in my heart it has to be true for everyone. It has to be true for everyone. So what to do about that then? So I confess that I wasn't keen to see him again. It caused such a turmoil. But life gives you lessons. And about 6 months later, I was running a follow-up group, and I was on my own. That was a prison because it had sex offenders. I wasn't allowed to go on my own. I always had to go with someone. But because I was running this small follow-up group, they allowed me on my own. And I think I was meant to only have 4 or 5 people in the room. Only he came. And so I got to spend 3.5 hours with him. And I asked him, what did you get when you came to the group and so on. And he said, well, at first he didn't get anything. He just thought it was woo-woo. But it reminded him of church, and it reminded him of God. And so it made him think about those things. And then one day he realized someone was walking down the wing where they live, and he was angry because they didn't give him his medication for depression. He was angry, and he was giving them bad looks and just playing up. And it suddenly hit him, I'm not depressed. I don't need medication. Maybe she is a sign from God. Maybe her doing that is actually helping me. And he started to see that in his life. So I was fascinated, and I kept talking to him. And then he shared his childhood. And he was a child of a group called the IRA, which is a terrorist group, was. And he shared things with me about what his family did. He was taken into prison from a very young age with guns and drugs in parts of his body, you can imagine. He was raped as a child. He had all of this going on. No wonder then that he had a skewed way of behaving in the world, right? Doesn't excuse it, doesn't forgive it, but it makes more sense of it.
Yeah.
Because when we see people who've done bad things. We think it's a random one-off. You know, how could they do that? Because we look at our own reality and we can imagine we would never do that. But if you look at their reality can be very different. And I reiterate that it doesn't mean that's okay. It definitely doesn't mean that. But what it does mean is that you can look beyond that behavior to the purity, the essence within. What he told me at the end of that session was that he knows he's going to be in prison forever. He'd been in prison for 10 years already. And he knows he's going to be in prison forever. He said, but I can make prison life much better for me and for other people.
Wow.
And that's what I'm going to do. So he started helping, for instance, the older people and the people with disabilities. And he stopped taking drugs completely and was counseling other people. So he became a helpful member of the prison and dedicated to that.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's he got the insight. And that's that's so beautiful, I think, also with this kind of work, is you open them up to who they are. So they can see the diamond in themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes they're resistant to it. So with your friend who said they can't be helped, sometimes it seems as though they can't be helped because they're resistant to help, especially if they're high risk. They've had psychologists and psychiatrists, they've been analysed, they've been told. I've met many, many people who were told from a child, you'll end up in prison. They've been written off, they've written themselves off. So when someone comes along and they're kind or they're trying to help, they struggle with that. They struggle with compliments. They struggle to believe that they're good in any way because it's not what they're used to. It's only when they have an insight or they shift in perspective that they can then start to maybe accept that there's some good there, and they look for that.
And what was your why? What happened in you that you were drawn to the prison work?
Yeah, goodness knows. So when I trained as a coach, I imagined that I would be on Hawaii with, you know, jeweled sandals and teaching, earning lots of money and teaching celebs or something. And then I found myself in prison. And I don't think I was drawn there. I think I was shown that's where to go. I never thought, oh, I want to work in prison. I thought I want to do the work that I'm meant to do. You know, I had no thought. So at first I worked with a lot of professionals, but people would come to me with addictions, no matter what their job. You know, I worked with a finance director that was breaking down in the toilets at work in between meetings. I worked with someone else who was taking coke before he could go to a meeting, cocaine. You know, so all these people with addictions and so on would come to me. So I researched addiction, and then I started working in the addiction community completely accidentally. I just found myself there, and I found family there. And as in, you know, I felt like I was at home. And then through that work, it was natural that the next step would be prison. And I remember the day that I had an interview at the prison, the day before I'd been not volunteering, but working for a coach in a high-end hotel and facilitating the tables and well paid and, you know, good work. And I thought, oh yeah, this is where it's at. This is what I want to do. And the very next day I had an interview at the prison, and I was sat in what they call the gatehouse, where you have to sit and wait to be escorted. And it's grubby and paint chipped off the walls and not very nice. And people walking around with tasers and radios and keys. And I sat there and I thought, I really want to work here.
Wow. It's so funny that the day before you had that experience and said, well, this is really what I meant to do.
Yeah.
Wow.
Life shows you, like I don't think you don't make up your niche, and you don't do any of that. Life shows you, life puts something in your way, and then you take it or you don't take it.
Yeah.
And so that's the thought I had. And honestly, I was petrified. I went into that prison. I didn't even know, am I allowed to say hello to people? Um, I didn't know, because I just knew from my pre-prison work, bad people go to prison. It's dangerous. It's a
Yeah.
dangerous place. And I was afraid. And I remember after my training, when I was even more afraid, because they train you into all the bad things that people can do to you while you're in there, and that you might get taken hostage, and
Oh,
that you
wow.
and the prison might close down, and you might have to stay the night, and you might find someone who's attempted suicide in their cell, and all these awful things. And I was on my own for the very first time, and there was a room. I was in the room that we were meant to be in, and the gatehouse to get out, it was about 5 minutes walk away, and there were a number of gates to go through and open with your keys and everything, and the whole place was empty. There wasn't even anyone out, and I ran from the room to the thing, going through the doors. And when I got to the gatehouse, I thought, what are you doing? Like, what do you think's going to happen?
Yeah.
And then how are you going to work here if you're this scared to be on your own? So for me, the prison work was such a blessing, because it highlighted, for me, I was there to learn. I wasn't there to teach. It highlighted constantly my invisible thinking, my own insecurities, my fears, and it helped me to address them.
And that's, I think, and you did it for 10 years.
Well,
Wow.
I was full-time in prison for 5 years,
Hmm.
and then COVID happened.
Yes. What did you do when COVID happened?
So in COVID, so we moved house to be by the local prison that I was working in. We actually moved house. And in COVID, all the prisons were locked down, and the men were locked up for 23 hours a day, 23
Wow.
hours a day, not in the yard, no faith-based work, no education, no mental health, no work.
And for how
Um,
long was it?
did that
How,
last?
yeah. How long did that
In
last?
some prisons, it's still happening.
Wow. But
In
is
some,
it still a COVID rule? No.
no, it's a made up, it's easier for the staff rule now. I
Oh,
know. Some prisons I was told the other day, I was speaking to an ex prisoner the other day, and he said he came out 18 months ago, and in the prison that he was in, they were still locking them up 23 hours a day. But even in 2023, this was happening. So 3 years on from COVID, well, we've all moved on.
yeah.
Human beings are being locked up in their cell, and their cells are tiny with their
Hmm.
toilet, and it's disgusting. So services were killed. I was fortunate for the first 18 months. I was allowed to go in and speak to the vulnerable prisoners with all my PPE on, and
Oh, yeah.
my mask and everything, and I had to stand at the door of the cell and speak through a crack in the door.
Wow.
Um, and I was allowed to do that for a while, but I wasn't paid to do that. I just did that voluntary. It was they didn't like it though. The prison staff didn't like it,
Mm.
so eventually that stopped as well. And we've been in a couple of prisons, but the main thing we did, the whole team got together and said, what can we do? And we created a distance learning program.
Oh, wow.
Initially, activity packs with crosswords and puzzles with Sid Banks quotes and three principles understanding in the mandalas and in the crosswords, and we sent them in, and then we created a distance learning program which still is running today.
Oh, wow.
So we have volunteers who I send in I write for the prison newspaper, and someone writes to say, this touched me, can I be on the program? So they get some materials and they get matched up with, we call them a buddy, and then the buddy emails them through a special system to ask them about their insights and help them. And I've got volunteers who've been doing that since COVID, and you would be surprised at how much people get just from that little bit of correspondence. Some of those people in prison don't get anything from anywhere else. And so that's, a blessing. But yeah, people really get a lot from that. So that I'm really happy that that is still going.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you've mentioned the three principles. I hadn't mentioned it before, but so this is a program which is originated from the three principles. It's from the three principle community.
So this program was originated by me with my understanding of the three principles, and then I collaborated with two other organizations who do work in underserved communities, and we created a curriculum that steps people through understanding how thought works and understanding how consciousness works and understanding how mind or the universe works and the bigger picture, and has them doing different exercises and some listening, and just has them realize that we are the creators of our own experience.
Yeah. Oh, but it's amazing because there's also, wasn't it George Pransky also who did this in the United States?
So a lady called Kathy Casey is most famous for the work in prisons in the States. And alongside her, also Jan and Chip Chipman, they worked in some prisons as well. And there was someone else that I've forgotten. I think maybe Elsie Spittle. I know she definitely worked in what she called Skid Row, but they did this sort of work as well. Yeah.
And when was the time then that you had that thought, well, okay, maybe it's time to do something else now? Last year.
So I had that thought in December 23. So since COVID, we've been doing that distance learning stuff, been going into some really still trying. Pivoted a little bit, started working with a big gambling organization and offering online gambling support, and working with homeless shelters locally and so on. But also I released my memoir at the same time, which I'm really pleased I did that, because that's like an ode, a celebration of my time working in prison, because I probably wouldn't write it now. So I released my memoir, and I started thinking about doing something different. And although I enjoyed that other work, the heart wasn't there in the same way. And so I knew I meant to be doing something else, but I can't think what that else is. And December 23, I thought, I think I'm done here. But then in the January, two massive opportunities presented themselves. And I thought, oh, okay, well, this is it, it's carrying on. And so we kept going. But I didn't have a team anymore. And the lads that had come out of prison and then come to work for us, they'd moved on. And those opportunities never unfolded. Things happened and they didn't unfold. And so by the end of 24, I knew I was completely, I knew I was done. And I just kept putting it off and putting it off. And then eventually I agreed with my husband, yes, we're done now. And so, yes, we'll close it. So we closed in January, and I was in a funk, because it meant such a lot to me. And I kept thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do. And maybe I'll be a life coach and, charge lots of money and become rich and famous. And I also thought about becoming a postwoman and driving a little van. And some people have said to me I'd be a good postwoman because I'd spread love, wherever I go. So I literally just threw myself on the arms of the universe and said, I'll do whatever's next.
Yeah.
And nothing really took. And then I was in Denmark, and I was running a small group that I run with a colleague. And I was telling them, maybe I'll be a postie, maybe I'll be a coach. And I went to bed, and Denmark's a very special place for me.
It's a special place.
Yeah. So in August last year, I was in Denmark, and my host came to me in the night and said, come and see what's in our garden. It was about midnight, and in the garden was the Aurelia Borealis.
Wow.
All the lights. It was amazing in the garden.
But in September,
In
of in August.
Yeah. Right.
That's amazing.
I know. So then in January, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I thought, I know what I want to do. And it was this idea of everywhere I go, people ask me, how do you get into prison? How do you do this? How do you do that? And I thought, I'll just teach people what I know
Yeah.
and see if that works. And then I was alive again. And it was like the start of Beyond Recovery. I knew, oh, this is it, or this is it now.
Yeah.
And so I just, from there, I just went and I started a program in March. I ran the first cohort in March. I've got a second one that I'm running in September. I've now written another book about that, a bit about that, and a business book and a little online course.
Great.
I know. And you know what it really says to me, Van? That when you really step into you're a vessel, you're a vessel, you're a catalyst, you don't need to figure it out. It gets figured out.
Yeah.
All the thing about finding your niche and doing this and doing that, it could be useful exercise towards insight, but it comes to you, doesn't it?
Yeah, it has to come out of yourself. You have to
Yeah.
get an insight. Yes.
Yeah. And I'm passionate about activating people who will work with underserved communities, because there's many people who don't even know about well-being. They don't. The lads in prison used to say, we wouldn't even know to look for this. Like we just get on with our lives. We don't even know about things like this exist.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, if I activate all the people who really want to do good work, then there'll be plenty of people around, and people can find a place, and they can always come to a group and they can access it. And I'm also passionate about, I've been a social entrepreneur for the last 10 years, and the one thing that we all have in common is no one thinks that they need to get paid. Like everyone does stuff for free, and funding's hard, and this is hard, and that, and it's not sustainable. And I know that from my own experience. You don't take care of yourself, the air mask principle.
Yeah.
You can't take care of anyone else.
Yeah.
You literally can't. So I'm passionate about activating them, but also helping them how they can make money too. whatever
Mhm.
they need, whatever that is, some people need lots and some people need
Yeah,
less. It doesn't matter. Because money is abundant, it's energy, it's available,
it's there.
it's there, and
Yeah,
we can access it.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And there's so much about money, so much to do about money. There are so many thoughts about money. It's amazing. And when people can see that, when you open that up for them, that money is just indeed energy,
yeah,
then they can make a shift.
yeah,
There are so many layers in their conditioning about money. It's incredible.
yeah. And same, me too. I had that
Mm-hmm.
a long time. When I was running my social enterprise, I didn't even pay myself properly for the first few years because I wanted all the money to go to the boys, and
Mm-hmm.
more groups and more resources. And it's what I needed to do at the time. But I met a philanthropist, and she said, I wouldn't even fund you while you're not paying yourself properly.
Mm-hmm.
I was so shocked because I thought it was an attribute, that I was on such a low salary. And I said, why? And she said, because you can't continue. It's not sustainable. If you don't pay yourself properly, you won't carry on doing the work. So my money will be wasted.
That's a great one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you were funded by philanthropist or the government. There
Yeah.
you
So
go.
again, and this is some things that I talk about a lot is money's everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You just have to find the source. And so my first pot of funding came from a local government. I didn't even know it was available. It's sort of completely serendipitous. And then there was more from there. And then I hooked up with a philanthropist who gave me a lot of private. So then I had some private donors. Then at another point, I thought I'd do a crowd fund. So I've done two crowd funds for the business, and I actually crowdfunded the publication of my book.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and where else? I mean, it's just everywhere. So again, you go with if you're a person who doesn't mind filling out funding applications, then do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you have to balance intuition and that feeling sense with practical and
Mm-hmm.
pragmatic. And so um it isn't just sit back and the money will come. It's more like what occurs to you to help you to get funding. So it might
Mm-hmm.
be, okay, well, funding applications, and there are plenty of those. But then you have to have the discipline of showing up and filling out those applications. And you can't do one and hope for the best. It has to become a discipline. It has to
Mm-hmm.
become something that you get better at and that you learn about and that you learn how it works. And
Mm-hmm.
that's part of the game. But
Yeah,
if
but it's also when you're in now, when you, sorry, when you are in your business now, you have to work with private clients or entrepreneurs who want to do this. And it's at first believing that they are there, they are willing to pay you. That's the
yeah,
most important thing
yeah,
to tell yourself, but people are willing to pay me for what I
yeah,
do.
yeah. I think I've borrowed this from another coach, but there is a massive problem with the coaching world that is underestimating itself.
Mm-hmm.
And when we do so much, we you can do free stuff so long as you know your value and you know what it's for. But
Mm-hmm.
if you do, I was doing free stuff for years and years and undervaluing myself and undervaluing the whole industry
Yeah.
in a way. And and then you do it because, or I did it because I didn't think I could. It was icky. It was such a surprise to me to say to somebody, it's this much. To me, it seemed like a big amount, but I wanted to practice doing it. It's this much. And that person said, yeah, fine.
Yeah. I mean,
Did
I
none
have
of
the
that
same
happen?
thing.
Yeah.
I had the same thing in my head. It was absurd. And the guy
Yeah.
said, okay.
Yeah.
I was like on the phone. I was like, huh? You, you shouldn't accept what I am asking. You, because I thought about that. You don't accept this. And that's amazing.
I know.
And it's, I don't know how it is in the UK, but in Holland, they say there are too many coaches, and you even can get coaching. You learn how to coach online, so it's a bit. I think I think something of it as well, that you can coach online because you have to learn, one on one. You can't
Yeah.
learn it online from a book. You can't learn that.
Yeah.
And so I think there are a lot of coaches, but I also think there are coaches for the people who want to be coached. So, and everybody will find the one fit for them. So it's going to be
Yeah.
okay. But the money thing, it's really a thing.
Yeah. And I mean, I used to say to people, and you don't have to be a coach.
Mm,
You can, there's so many things that you can do. You can, even if, like my husband, he doesn't work, he's retired, and he impacts people just by being him. You
hmm
know, the the way that he is in the world, and I have people come for retreats sometimes, and he cooks for us, and people get just as much from his company as they do from the official coaching that I do.
Yeah.
The way he is with the cat and the garden and the neighbors, he does just as much for the world as I do. And he's not a coach, and he never wants to be a coach.
Yeah.
Um, and I always say that to people, you don't have to be a coach, but follow the nudges. The nudges
Yeah.
might, when in the early days, because of the work that I was doing, I was sort of accidentally famous in the community. And I went to Salt Spring Island where they had a school, a free
hmm
principal school. And all these people came saying, hello, hello, can we go to lunch? And asking me, I was overwhelmed. I thought, who are all these people? Like, how do they know me? But because of the work I was doing, um, I got a lot of support from the OGs and, Elsie and Jan and Mark Howard, all of those people, and Michael really, really supported me and appreciated the work that I was doing. But anyway, we were on the island and we went to lunch with this person and that person, and they all turned out to be friends of Sid Banks.
Okay.
And you wouldn't even know who they are because they went and did their normal jobs. So their lives changed, they saw something, their lives shifted, and then they went and they were school teachers and they were working at the visitors center and like volunteering and doing filmmaking, and they just got on with their lives.
hmm
But their lives were different, their families were different, their children were different, and the
hmm
people who interacted with them felt that difference. And so they were different. The ripple effect was huge. We get it into our head that we have to be this thing or we have to do this thing. We
Yeah.
just need to live our life. And then if the thing comes to you, do that, try that. But you could be a client of mine worked in an environment and thought she had to be a coach. And I was like, just be where you are, change them from the inside out, go like spread it there. And then that way, there's no pressure on
Mhm.
being a coach or being a thing
Yeah.
or doing something or go and work in prison.
Yeah, but that's also from the outside. You have to label it whether you're good or bad. It's yeah. Just be
Yeah.
just be you where you are.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Amazing. I want to thank you. I love this conversation.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for sharing your story, the prison work. I really like that. And also how you show up in your life. That you are willing to be vulnerable when life tells you, well, I think we're done here.
Yeah.
And that you're willing to sit back and ask life, well, now what?
Yeah. Yeah. Takes me a minute, but I do it.
Yeah, but that's normal because our conditioning is, and all the outside world are asking, what are you doing now? And
Yeah.
how are you now? Tell me, what are
Yeah.
you up to? It's amazing to stay calm and to stay centered.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been such fun.
Ja. Jij ook weer bedankt voor het luisteren en tot een volgende keer. Dank je wel weer voor je aandacht. Je aandacht is tenslotte je kostbaarste bezit. Dus dank je wel dat je jouw aandacht hieraan hebt willen besteden. Ik ben ook benieuwd wat je ervan vond van dit gesprek. Laat vooral even een comment achter hieronder of stuur me een berichtje. Je kunt mij vinden op www.yvonnevandis.nl. En daar kun je ook een heleboel blogs vinden over spiritualiteit, ondernemen, bewustzijn, energie. Nou, you name it. Er staan ook een heleboel gratis trainingen en mooie e-books. Leef je uit en ontzettend dank en graag tot een volgende keer.